Welcome to Behind the SME, the podcast where we dive into the stories of founders, leaders, and visionaries of small and medium-sized enterprises. As the CEO of a small business myself, I want to uncover what drives the success of SMEs by talking to those who are in the trenches, building their businesses from the ground up. I hope you enjoy the episode. George, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Good to have you on. So I normally start by explaining how we know each other. And we were introduced by a former guest of ours, Will, whose podcast will have gone out by the time this goes out. He obviously came on and went, that was an unbelievable experience. I will think about the best guest I can possibly think of in my Rolodeck. And he came up, so no pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thanks for your time. Let's start by hearing a little bit about your career to date.
Yeah, so I started a business about 10 years ago now, and we installed cycle racks to the construction industry. Cycle racks, cycle shelters, bootstrapped, post-uni startup with a business partner. Really fun experience overall. 10 years, built a good business, and then it was sold about a month ago now. So exited, sold to the largest company in the industry. And yeah, amazing experience, lots of hiring, lots of learnings, procurement from abroad, selling to different types of customers, learning on the job, like that naivety of starting from nothing. And yeah, 10 years went pretty fast and now I'm here. So exited that business and now I've just completed on buying a digital marketing agency. So starting out in my new life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a brief overview of what I've done.
1 month, already bought the new business. You didn't want to go
take
some time out.
That lined up really nice. I don't know about time out. I think a little break would have been nice, but you can't really always engineer in the way life works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how good a long period off would do me, to be honest.
And you got a 6-month-old.
6-month-old, yeah. Started weaning him this weekend. So he is starting to sleep a bit better now. So I feel like we're crawling out the trenches of the first 6 months, to be honest. Yeah. But yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride, particularly the last 6 months.
Well, you don't look tired.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I think
that might be spare room strategy.
That's very smart. Maybe we'll get into that. So, I mean, a year ago you had a business and no child. Now you have a completely different business. You sold a business.
Different life, it feels like.
Yeah, completely different life. Yeah. How's that been?
It was a bloody tough year, actually.
Really?
To be fair, it was a tough year. Yeah. I think I was probably at a point of like something needed to change. I think with the way it was going, I was still in a partnership with that business partner. That was just before he exited the business, and neither of us were probably loving it anymore. We'd hit a point of scale where, like, cracking business. Like, it's one of those, not why are you complaining situations, but like making profit, cool team, didn't really have to do much day-to-day work in the company, but you just want to change, and something needed to give. Yeah, and I think you need to get to a point particularly when you're comfortable, you need to get a point where the friction is strong enough for you to take action and move away from a situation that isn't serving you anymore. Yeah. So, business partner and I agreed to split, and then I decided to sell the business. And we actually managed to sell it in 6 months. So, and Charlie, my son, came along that time as well. So That was the story of the last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Goodness me. Well, let's go back in time, because I don't know many university students that went, this is a nice bike rack. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make a business out of this. Yeah. Yeah. How did it come about?
I actually didn't ride a bike at uni. Really? We went to Brooks in Oxford. You got to be careful not to say we went to uni in Oxford. And I didn't ride a bike, but I have since got quite into cycling. I love my road bike. I ride everywhere around London on a Brompton. But it was more, and I did law, and I was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to do that. I want to start a business. And then you're trying to find a service or like a product line where you don't need to sell 10,000 of them to pay your wage each month, because we're bootstrapping. It's like, what can I sell and I only need to sell a few of them to pay a wage? And I thought, okay, high ticket items. I'd had a bit of insight into construction through internships and family things. So I thought, okay, what can I sell to the construction industry? Stumbled across bike racks, and I thought, I don't need to sell too many of those to get to a decent package size. So that's what kind of drew us to the bike rack area. Don't need to sell too many each year to maybe make a 30 grand wage or something. You know, we can get by. If we don't, doesn't work, doesn't matter too much. We haven't bought a load of stock because you're manufacturing to order. So finding something that fit our kind of niche there, if you like, of don't need to sell too many to make it work. Does that make sense as a reason to kind of start?
Yeah. I mean, what drew me to the bike rack area at that age was mostly cigarettes, but I totally take your point.
Yeah.
So was it your design? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that was the other thing. It was like, didn't really have any startup capital. Had worked with a really good friend of mine called Rupert, who became my business partner, and we had the sort of typical university like events company thing. So we liked working
Club
for
nights.
ourselves. Yeah, basically. You call it events. We didn't have any capital. We didn't want to raise money, so we thought, okay, well, we can't design a product. I remember actually going with Rupert to this company called Oxford Product Design, I think they were called. We're like, right, we're thinking about making these products, and the money they would charge for their time just was a bit scary to us. So let's just sell someone else's product that already exists. So you go on Google, you're like, right, what can we find, and then resell it. And then when you tell your mates that, or your family, like, oh, I'm going to start selling bike racks, and we're going to buy it off someone else, they go, well, why don't they just buy it from that person themselves? Why don't they just go direct? So then you go, yeah, you're right, we better buy it from abroad. So then you start looking abroad, started looking to the Netherlands, found a really decent established company called Clava, who made the products we needed, reached out to them, never sold anything. We'd made some brochures and like a Squarespace website, and they agreed to supply us with their product for the UK. So that was like the in that allowed us to populate the website, make it look like we actually had a business, and then start cold calling, essentially.
Okay. And so what was the angle? What was the edge? Why were people
literally no edge? Literally no edge. And I don't think that matters. Like, it's just, is there a market? Yes. Can you reach it? Yes. There was no moat around that business. You know, say you tomorrow set up a website selling bike racks, you could contact the same people I did. No moat, no cost to entry, no difference. Just, will you buy from us? And something someone said to me when we started that is just do what you say you're going to do. Well, that sounds a bit too easy, but that genuinely did make a difference. So like, we'll sell you these products. We did seek out good product, but it's not like we were the only people selling good products in the industry. So find that product, no particular reason to buy from us, just hammer the phones and try and sell it and sell a good product. So yeah.
I'm fascinated by this. I'm absolutely fascinated by this. I'll tell you why. And that's because you start a company, the first thing that everybody asks you is, what's the edge? What's the difference? What's the USP? What's the whole list of reasons why they'd go to you and not someone else? And you have to go, okay, obviously this is really important, right? I must think about this, right? And I studied business, so this was, in my academia, there must be, USP, a value proposition, the whole shebang. But you wrestled a business into fruition, and a decent sized business will come onto its scale in the end, through sheer grit, from what I can tell.
Yeah, literally like forced it through. Do you actually think that though, right? Do you actually think that you need a unique selling point? If I think about the businesses I've contracted over the 10 years of working, like used as agencies or suppliers or subbies, it's like it's very rare you find someone who's actually got a specific reason, or like, oh my God, you're so unique. And there's certainly something to seek out. It's certainly a positive, but like, is it that important, or is it just being present in the market and attracting leads and delivering good work?
I actually think that your simplification is very apt. I think the word unique is the wrong word, because in a market of businesses, unless you're talking about the really forward-thinking tech products where the unique aspect of a USP can create a market, for 99% of businesses, actually just doing something marginally better is enough. But I would say that is an edge that's important. What I'm interested in perhaps is whether or not you're downplaying the value that you did add to your customers. Did you solve problems for them that perhaps you're being modest about, if you see what I mean?
No, I think it comes back to your other point, which is like, I forced it through. Right. Like, I forced it through. And when you don't have any startup capital and you're like, right, I just want to do this, I'm going to give it all this time, and you just by your sheer will, I kind of look back and think, how the hell did we actually get that off the ground? Because there were really established competitors.
Mm.
It wasn't like a mega space, but I suppose I'd observed that there was no one in the space that was, I wasn't competing against like an ASOS sized business. I wasn't competing against Google. I was competing against other businesses that I could foresee us reaching that scale. So that makes it less scary because you're only working against the fairly modest Google AdWords spends and fairly modest sized teams of BDMs. I'm like, I can do that. And I used to think completely naively at the time because I was incredibly ineffective as a salesperson when I was 21 trying to sell it. Well, I can work harder than them. And yeah, I just used to, I moved back home after uni, moved in with my dad and just cold called people for a year.
Wow.
After we had this Squarespace website set up. The Dutch product on the website, like had a few things to start shouting about. I was like, oh, you'll buy my bike racks, you know, but it was just a presence in the market. Like there was nothing different about us. I think as we grew, we did a really good job of branding. We did a really good job with shouting about the work we've done. But when you haven't done any work, it's quite hard. It's why I say, like, I can't believe we made it work, because you're on the phone with someone and they're like, oh, where have you worked? And you're kind of trying to dance around the fact that you haven't really worked anywhere before. So there was nothing unique. There was no gap in the market. We thought, oh my God, we need to sell that product. And if I look back on the people in our space, or kind of the people in orbit around it who wanted to do something unique, they're the ones who pushed water up a hill. They're the ones who thought, I've got this new thing, let's really try and change the way people think and revolutionize the industry. I just did the same thing, and I did it well, and that worked.
Yeah. which I think is a really valuable lesson in itself, you know, because there's lots of people that are waiting to do something for that idea. You know,
you can well overthink it.
Yeah, you
like
can.
You speak about business degree and stuff. I've got nothing against business degrees, but I think you can over intellectualize it. It's just, is there a market? Can you sell to it? And you can be as fun and creative with that as you want. And some people care a lot about the uniqueness of what they deliver or coming up with a new product. But I just like boring stuff. Bike racks aren't that boring, but I like stuff that just is functional and you serve a market and there's scale to it. You know what I mean?
But yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I think it's really valuable and really emphasizes a message that we always need re-emphasizing, that sometimes you can't take away from the value of hard work. You know, it is irreplaceable. No matter how good a product is, you got to graft with it. It's not going to sell itself in most cases.
I'd say yes and yes, but like I wasn't effective. I was working very hard, but I wouldn't go as far as saying I was spinning my wheels, but I was slowly edging forward at a pace that's not really, you know, I certainly wouldn't do it the way I did it then now, but that's driven by the lack of capital more than anything else.
Sure.
And there was a 18-month period where really not a lot happened. I was trying to sell each day. My business partner Rupert lived at his parents' place in Wales. He was trying to sell. We occasionally won a very small bit of work, but we weren't paying ourselves. It was like, it wasn't effective. The hard work did get us there in the end, but there's so much luck involved with that. Like, I was cold calling people, and I remember, oh, God knows how many months in it was, and then I rang the University of Essex. I was like, hey, do you need bike racks? Like, it's quite a specific cold call, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got,
if you do, you don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember I only got one person hung up on me in the whole period of time I did it. It was like, hey, do you need bike racks? And she was like, yes, I do need bike racks. I was like, okay, wicked. Here we go. And she was like, oh, we need 200 two-tiers, some shelters. And I was like, oh my God, this is like an amazing inquiry. And I just hit her at the right time. I think she was called Charlotte.
Shout out Charlotte.
Yeah, shout out Charlotte. I think that was her name. And I was like, cool, I'll drive up there and come and do a survey. I didn't know how to do a survey. And then they showed us this. I had in my mind over the probably 6 months prior of when you get a survey, you go there and there'd be this perfect space. I went there and it was like this sloped bit of like disused land between two buildings under a sort of walkway. I thought,
with an asbestos floor in it.
Yeah, it was sketchy. And then we did all these drawings and I was like, okay, it was massive. It was like a massive job in terms of the scale of it. And that took like 9 months to close. And I actually closed it. And I don't really know how to this day. But we won that job. Cracking case study. It's still a really good case study on the website. But there's luck. If I didn't get that University of Essex job, I might have packed it in. I might have packed it in because that was the first time we started to get revenue.
You make your own luck there, you know. I mean, what call
Yeah.
that day and week was it? You know,
Yeah,
it might have been the 50th call that day when you could have easily gone, do you know what, just go and scroll LinkedIn for a bit and
I did a lot
pretend
of
to
that
be
as
busy.
Yeah, I did a lot of that as well, but I was trying to be busy. The way I described it to friends at the time when you're in that stage of business is like, oh, how you going on? Are you busy? And you're like, no, I'm absolutely not busy, but I'm really busy trying to be busy. So yeah, we closed that job. And if we hadn't closed that job, it might have given up, might have taken another year. So that was the momentum we needed to break out of the like spend all day cold calling, because you've suddenly started to get some revenue, then you've got some certainty the business will work, and then you can start to invest in other things basically. So yeah, that was probably the breakthrough moment, that job.
Amazing. Well, again, shout out to Charlotte, if that is your real name.
Yeah.
The bike rack buyer from the University
think about how
of
bad
Essex.
that cold call is. If you actually went to like a sales team was like, right, we're going to ring everyone in the country and be like, do you need bike racks? The chance of hitting gold there is quite slim.
What are your bicycle parking needs?
Yeah.
How do you currently service your
It's not that catchy.
bicycles?
But it worked. And it's still there and it looks good. It looks really good, that job. So I'm still really proud of that one, which is cool. Like, we didn't actually mess it up. We delivered a good bit of work, which was, that was something to be proud of for sure.
So, you know, overnight you're a young 20-year-old with a business, you know, and you're learning as you went. What are some of your big reflections across 10 years from running the firm?
Hiring people is like everything. Hiring people is where all the leverage comes. They do things better than you will. Like, you can't scale without people. That is like number one. Oh, and leads and people. If you've got leads coming in and you've got people, you're good. I'd rather have loads more leads than, you know, improved conversion rate. Those two things fuel the growth 100%, I think.
Sure. And so let's pick them one by one. Let's start with people, as you started there. What was your process for choosing people, and how did you look after them?
To be fair, towards the end, I think we had a good sense. We generally liked people to come in with limited experience, not no experience, and empower them to kind of grow up through the ranks quite quickly. And we had a lot of success stories with that. In the early days, it was driven by budget. And you have hits and misses, as I'm sure you've experienced as well. But I was never a big fan after that low budget time of hiring someone expensive and very experienced, because building a culture was always important to us. We had pretty good staff retention over the years. Like, people generally stayed for a long period of time. I think we offered something quite different to most construction firms. We weren't a construction firm, but a job in the construction industry. So bring people in, let them contribute, give them freedom, trust them, but we weren't so free-flowing that people went off and did what they want. There was some structure and some rigidity around rules, but controlling that, building culture, and letting people not find their way. I'm not articulating the best, but we really let people grow within the business. We really did.
And you said that you struggled with senior hires.
I suppose I wouldn't say we struggled with senior hires. We never really nailed that. And we had such success with bringing people in young and them staying for multiple years. And as the business grows, when your business is growing, you can keep the staff happy. You can give them promotions and move them up. And there were two examples that come to mind. Very early on, maybe 2019, we had this young guy called Raj come and interview with us for a junior sales role. And you know, when you speak to someone on the phone, we used to do phone interview, video interview in person, or like phone interview in person. And you know, when you speak to someone on the phone, you're like, yeah, they're the one. Do you ever get that? Do you, like, on that first call, you're like...
Yeah, I've had that before. Yeah, I mean, I would normally gather people to check on that feeling, but I've had that before.
Maybe I shoot from the hip too much, but I'm like, okay, cool, they're the one. And generally, they would be the one. But yeah, he joined at 22, 23. He looked a bit older because he had this massive beard, but he was so good. And he just committed himself to the business, treated it like it was his own, and just went at it, sold really well. You're like, right, Raj, you're doing well. Here's a junior salesperson. Here's something else to manage. Build this process. And that was one of our real success stories, like bringing someone in. I think he stayed for 5 or 6 years, which was enough time to make a big impact in the business. But that was a real success story. And after that, I kind of thought, that's the way I'd like to model roles going forward. And not everyone goes quite as far as perhaps Raj did in the business, but I always had that approach, as if you put a lot in, you'll get a lot out. And I think that's the way I took forward a lot of the hires.
Sure. Do you think that there were specific things that you did that created that feeling that you describe as he felt like he was an owner of the business?
I think there's an element of I was very open with people. Like, we're pretty open book on numbers. We're pretty open book on what we were doing and how we were trying to grow things, and always being quite a small team, and that sort of punched quite well for our weight in terms of turnover. People felt like they had an impact and they could put their ideas forward. I think that was important. So if they said, "Oh, well, how about we do this?" We'd be like, "Cool, let's implement it," and you kind of just pivot, make a Google Doc, and then that process is implemented. So it was giving them that chance to implement things. A lot of running a business of that kind of scale, as well as just creating a Google Doc and then forgetting about it a month later, and that's the process, and then you make a new Google Doc and that's the new process, and people stick by that. So it was giving him the opportunity and giving them the opportunity to feel they're in control. And it wasn't a facade. They were genuinely in control. But if someone felt, I'm in this business, I'm in control of my life, I have to come in between these hours and I have to work this many days a year, but generally I can guide my process, people seem a lot happier and they stay a lot longer. So it was a lot about freedom and authority to make change.
What's quite interesting about what you're saying is you've hit on this quite interesting business theory, and apologies going back to my studies, but if you have too much process, then what happens is you create robots. If you have too much freedom, then you create anarchy. But there's this lovely sweet spot in the middle where you've got a good amount of process and a good amount of freedom, and they call that the sweet spot where you have engagement. And I think that's what you're describing with Raj, where there is structure. There's a way that you do things, but there's also the structure and the ability to challenge it, to come up with new ideas. And so he feels like he can make a change. He can bring an idea to the table that's going to land on fertile soil.
And that's super interesting. That made me think, like, isn't that the way for so many things in business and with hiring people, that there's like a middle? And if you go that middle way, that middle ground, you're good. It's like too much work, too little work. When you've got someone doing too little work, well, there's many ways people go with that, but I'm bored, I've not got enough to do. You're scrabbling around, you get a bit stressed out because you haven't got enough to do, or you overload them, and there's a sweet point of tension in a role, and there's a sweet point of freedom in a role, and there's probably that you could apply to a lot of things. And if you just strike things down the middle, people are generally happy. And and on that line of process and anarchy, it's the same as the business got more mature, and as directors you progress out your day-to-day roles, you become very process-driven, which is essential. But also then when you get too process-driven, you start to be detached from the role. So again, it's a middle line that I think is critical in small business. I think that's an interesting point, actually. That's a good one to sort of play out across multiple factors in a company.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously the challenge then, how do you do that at scale?
Yeah.
And so you might, for example, have a process that exists, but then every so often time out with the team to analyze the process, make changes to it, but as a group. And therefore, when the next time they come to go through the process, they go, "Oh, I made that change.
Yeah.
I quite like that."
Yeah.
And there's no frustration with it, friction with it, like you said, because everyone
contributed.
owns it.
Make a new Google Doc. That's how we ran the business.
Is it? Okay.
And that reminds me as well of, I remember we worked with a coach who was really good called Mark. And me and my business partner, some of the senior management over the years, worked with Mark. And I remember once thinking, like, right, it'd be really cool to get Mark to run a workshop, and so the team can define the company's cultures and the team can define where the business is going. And that was too much freedom, because we actually got some negative feedback from that workshop. They were like, "No, we don't want to be led. We want to be led to a point." And that was a good learning for me as well. So I thought I've tipped too far, as you say, towards certainly wasn't anarchy, but like I've tipped too far away from, I need to guide to a point, and then people need to sort of add the finishing touches more than actually lay the road themselves.
We're in a really interesting topic, I think, of the right level of involvement as a leader in setting the mission and the direction.
Yeah, it's hard, and also it's constantly moving target.
Yeah, it is, and you sometimes you need to be led. So for example, in crisis, a more dictatorial leadership style actually is more effective.
Yeah.
But not in times of crisis. A more participative leadership style is more effective. It's kind of horses for courses slightly, right? You do have to adapt to what's in front of you.
Yeah, I think sometimes you've just got to say, "No, I know," I think I know on that one we're doing that. And sometimes you can upset people when you've got to deliver it the right way. Sometimes you go, do you know what? This actually, like, so much stuff doesn't actually matter. Do you know what I mean? In a business, so much stuff doesn't actually matter that you can offload a lot of the decision making on that. And then the stuff that really matters, sometimes you say, no, that does need to be done. Yeah.
I would say, I mean, a useful takeaway for anyone listening that has what they would consider a really good idea, that they're struggling to get off the ground in their business, they're struggling to get buy-in. The question would be, who was involved in the creation of this idea and its implementation? And if that wasn't, a fairly large group of people, it might be why you're struggling to get it off the ground.
But yeah, I agree. But then the counter to that is like, when you're in a room, say you're actually we're in a business situation trying to put through new ideas, people want to put their ideas forward for the sake of putting ideas forward, and you can end up with such decision fatigue. It comes back to the same thing. There's a middle way, isn't there?
Yeah.
One person can get things done quickly, and a group can sometimes get things done more thoroughly or better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So you obviously, you took the approach of hiring younger talent and nurturing it. And it got me thinking about some of the experiences I've had with hiring over the years, where it can be quite easy to hire the profile in front of you because you think they might solve some of the immediate challenges that you're facing. You might call it a hero hire or a hope hire, and very easy to do, because you're head down going, how the hell am I going to get this sorted? And then you meet someone and, they might as well have a ray of light shining from above their head. But 3 months later, they solve those challenges, but they're wrong for the role and for the business. And I was wondering, whether or not you had some challenges with your senior hires that resonate with that.
I've definitely had both of those experiences. We've been generally pretty lucky with our senior hires. In the last year of the business, when we were kind of getting towards the end of our tenure as owners, and things were good, as I say, but not great. And business partner and I were finding our mutual way to go our separate ways. I was like, right, we need an MD or like a GM, someone like that. And we did a few. I remember the first interview I did was a senior person for more of a commercial director role. I thought maybe that's what it means, and that wasn't right. And then I, through a recruiter, did a search for a full MD. Like, let's get a proper MD in here. Let's get someone who's got loads of experience. This is it. This is what I need to do.
Seasoned.
Yeah,
MD.
I want the big time people. I want a name. And
give me someone that studied MDing.
Yeah, and like you think you want to tick these boxes. You're like, this is what I'm meant to do. I built a business for 10 years. Now I must step away and get this amazing MD in. And we interviewed this guy, and he was amazing. He was a really good. He could. You're like, you could run this business tomorrow. I didn't know if he would have grown it. That was one of the things, and it would have been a big hit off our bottom line to hire, but I very nearly did. And then I had a long-standing finance manager who was much more than that, called Kerry. And I remember her saying, "What if we had this young new starter in almost, who'd been there 6 months or so, who was doing really well in sales and sales management. What if," and she was called Carrie, who still work together very well today. What if she could run it? And it's like, oh, really? Like, you could tell she had the energy, she had the potential, but she'd been here 6 months. But my wife was about to give birth in like 4 weeks' time, and I'd already had contact from a potential buyer of the business. And I thought, well, I'm kind of running out of time here. And do I take the big risk on the MD? And an MD, seasoned MD, might take a bit of time to learn the business and embed and make a difference. But Carrie knows the business, and she's got the energy, and boy, did she want it. She wanted that job. So we gave her a trial when I stepped away on pat leave, and she absolutely smashed it. Like, she absolutely smashed it. I genuinely didn't work at all really for a month, and I came back and it was running really well. And that was one of the most rewarding things I'd done. So I sort of swept by the big senior hire and did a promote from within. And I could see how that could have not worked, but it really worked out. I remember when I left for pat leave, I was like, good luck, Carrie. And, Kerry was supporting her, and we had coach Mark working with her as well. And I knew she'd do a good job. I didn't think it'd be that good. And I came back from pat leave and I felt a bit like a visitor in my business. It was, you come in, you're like, wow. And she just had like a different energy about her and people were looking up to her. And it was probably the most rewarding experience I'd had in the 10 years, seeing someone genuinely run it. And that was a risk. That could have gone either way. But she still runs it today. And that is probably one of the main reasons we got to sell it as well. I had genuinely stepped away.
I had an amazing piece of advice from someone when I appointed an MD in one of my businesses, and they taught me through this thing called a decision matrix, where they said, look, what you don't want to do is appoint an MD, give them the title, and then actually continue to do the role and just puppeteer this poor person. It's not right. You're not setting them up for success. What you need to do is give them complete, crystal clear clarity over what they're able to make a decision on and what you want to be looped in on. So come up with 3 boxes, right? A C decision is something that they can make a decision on, and they don't even need to tell you about it. A B decision they can make a decision on, but to let you know afterwards. And an A decision, it's your decision, and they should come to you, but ultimately you want the final say on it. And you go away and write a list of all of the different potential decisions that you might make during a general kind of week, month, whatever. Everything through from changes to the budget, hiring, firing, new values, clients offboarded, changing pricing structure, legals, the whole shebang, everything. And then you go and do the list separately and you kind of compare notes and then you talk about it. And as an exercise, a little bit time consuming, maybe a couple of hours each. But what's interesting is when you come back together, they normally put quite a few more up in the A and B category, and you've normally put quite a few in the C and B category. And as a process, it's really, really empowering because they go, oh, wow, I'm able to make that call by myself. And like, I think, you've got such a great view on this. I'm more than comfortable with you doing that. And they walk away from it going, I know what I can do here. I've got complete clarity over my remit. Really good process, and I would suggest to anyone putting someone senior into a business.
I didn't do a process as thorough as that. I think that sounds really sensible, but we had Carrie and then Kerry, who was sort of supporting her, and Kerry had quite a bit more experience in businesses than Carrie did, and it was just, only ring me if you really need to. And I think she rung me once when I was on pat leave, something like that I helped out with a decision that she could have taken on her own. But I did have a similar view to it, that there's a lot more I would entrust her with than maybe she thought that I would have done. But it was such a successful move and so rewarding that as I go forward, I would, if I spot someone like that again, I wouldn't hesitate to keep promoting them through. And genuinely stepping away from the business is a really, really positive thing. It also really drove me to know that I didn't want loads of time off, and I wanted that purpose. I didn't miss what I had in Turvec, but I was very much excited for what was coming next. Because there's a level of stimulation you seek as a business owner or someone who starts a business, and once you've got someone running it, it loses quite a lot of its excitement, really, because you really do only hear about reporting and issues, which isn't that fun going forward.
Yeah. I want to pick up on something you mentioned a couple of times. I think I caught his name, Mark. Your business coach.
Yeah.
You've spoken about him a few times. Talk to me about the role that he played during this process.
So I've known Mark for 6 years maybe, and I met him through a workshop through kind of a mutual business connection. And I thought that'd be cool to work with a coach. You're kind of just curious. And he came in, he did some work with myself and Rupert, and we both really liked him. It's kind of like business therapy. Some of it's functional business stuff, and some of it's a bit more personal on what you want out of the company and what you want going forward. But yeah, Mark was great. It was a real sort of real support mechanism for me. He helped manage the last couple of years of Turvec when things were going well, business was running, but perhaps I was starting to tire of the business a little bit, and the business partnership we were looking for ways to move on from that. He was incredibly helpful and probably was the only reason it was such a successful outcome. And then managing that exit through to actually trying to sell it, that was quite a stressful autumn for me this year with selling a business, new baby, taking it on my own. There was a lot on there, and I think particularly when you lose a business partner or a business partnership ends, you're so used to talking to that person all the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily have someone to lean on. Like, I didn't want to offload on the MD of my business, and you don't want to, completely offload in your personal life all the time. So having a business coach was great, and I would really like to continue with that, going forward. He made a big impact.
And how do you think you got the most out of that relationship?
The more you give, the more you get back. The more open you are, the more they can see why you're making certain decisions and help you based on them. I think if you're a bit of a closed book and say, oh, here's my problem in the business, this person is annoying me, you're not going to get a lot of a business coach there, them saying, well, you should get rid of them. But if you're actually leaning on them slightly emotionally and saying, because I'm not saying all business decisions are emotional, they're not, but a lot of why you do things or why you want to take a certain direction is because you're following your gut feeling and you're questioning yourself there. So the more I gave him, the more I got back. And it ended up as just a relationship where I was just voice noting him every few days, being like, help, I need support with this. And yeah, it was, he did way beyond his hours in those last couple of months of Turvik for sure. So I owe a lot to him, and probably wouldn't have sold the business without. Probably not.
Yeah. I think what I'm taking from the way you approached that relationship was you took in no ego, and you were going in, as you said, completely an open book, not sheltering how you really felt, and therefore he could be straight up back with you. It sounds like a really great relationship and a very transparent and true relationship.
Yeah.
And what I'm also taking is that the advice he was giving was landing on fertile soil. And what I mean by that is he would say something back to you and you would go, yep, and then go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've probably had this, I certainly have had this, where you're spend a lot of time invested coaching somebody else. They smile and nod, but actually that's the end of it. And they're paying you lip service. Everyone's wasting their breath. It's all a bit of a charade. And then, 2 weeks later, you do it again. What's the point?
But why would you? I don't understand why you do that. Like, there's so many people so much further ahead than me that I want to just learn from. So when I meet someone or I'm dealing with a business guy, I just want to be like, but why? Like, why? Come on, let me absorb the knowledge. I don't understand that. Why you take the advice and not act on it. I find that, I don't know. I don't compute that way.
I feel the same way, but I know that it happens, and I think it's a really good headspace. I think it's a really healthy space to be. To go, I don't know everything. I am work in progress, and I'll continue to be work in progress, and that sets up a great mindset for learning.
Yeah, I definitely don't know everything. I've learned so much where I know where to trust myself, and maybe areas where I need a bit of support. Also, I don't really know what I want. I think I know what I want. I think I know the way I'm going, and I'm going to do it, and I'm always going to have some forward momentum. But by working with people like Mark, or having conversations like this, or meeting other business owners for breakfast like I did this morning, like, it's good for you because you question yourself. You can get too much in your own head and be like, here's my plan. I'm rigid. I'm sticking to it. No, it's about forward momentum. I don't know everything. I probably don't even know where I want to go, but I'm going to keep moving. And then your course is kind of like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. So let's talk about the blank sheet of paper moment, if there was one. I think my personality type, according to my chief of staff, is that I love blank sheets of paper.
Okay.
So it sounds great. You kind of towards this point of exit. There must have been a moment where you went, "What's next? Where do I go with this?"
Yeah.
How did you approach that?
I think I'm so lucky in that I generally always think I know what I want to do next. So I think I'm lucky with that. But the last couple of... Turvik had great success in digital marketing, lead flow through digital marketing. I quite enjoyed that. And I did a non-exec position for a business in the digital marketing space for a guy who's become a friend of mine, been very supportive. I thought, I think I'll do that next. Turvik was physical product. Every month you have to sell a lot of stuff to pay the bills. There was zero in recurring revenue. We had to buy stock and then sell it to get our margin. So it was gulping a lot of cash in that last couple of years when we started to buy a lot of stock in advance. I thought, okay, this is fun. Genuinely, this is fun, but I want to try something new. There's also a lot of... I focus so much on quality in Turvik. I feel you should take responsibility when you're installing a physical product into the public realm. If someone's going to use it, it's got to work. It's got to be good. And that was probably slightly to my commercial detriment, but I don't regret that at all. So I'd done that space, and I didn't think, right, I want to go on and sell bins. Like, I kind of have done that sort of thing. And the offer from Broxat, the company who bought it, is they're just such a good company. I was like, cool, I can park that there. I'm very happy to leave that business in what I think is the best long-term home for it. They're excellent people. So I'd kind of had been germinating, yeah, ideas for a couple of years. I built myself largely out the business. When the MD took on, I was fully out, but I was kind of half out, 3/4 out for a couple of years before. And I was pretty bored. I wanted to do other things, but I had a business partner that I respected and didn't want to go off and do something else, and he viewed it the same way. So I'd had a lot of time to percolate and think, I think I'll do this next. Service or something like that, recurring revenue, just try something different. I'm quite excited about just trying something completely new. I didn't want to do B2C though. I think I maybe one day, but I want to do B2B, complete opposite of Turvik. What can I do that's recurring revenue, that's not a physical product, that's going to need less big gulps of cash to buy stock? So that was my blank sheet of paper, was a craving to try something completely new and start from scratch. And I'm doing it now, and I'm properly in it, and I'm really enjoying it, because it does feel a bit like the buzz of the early days of Turvik. I feel slightly less naive, but I quite enjoy that. Sometimes I'll be in a meeting at the moment, I'm learning a lot in that hour, and it's quite nice to just not be, because I did become a bit of an expert in cycle parking, which is limited in its application. So it's nice to be a bit of a beginner, but with the context and experience of, I know the important bits, I know what levers to pull to get the right results for businesses, but I'm learning a lot. So my blank sheet of paper was a craving for something completely different, really, but a knowing that I like work. I think work is good. I think for most people, having a purpose and a drive and something to go to each day is good for you. Seeking a time where you're completely free of work, I'd kind of got there, and it wasn't for me. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, we're almost there. So wrap up question. You can choose best or worst advice you think you've ever had.
This isn't really advice, but there was this, when I first started Turvik, I was at my in-laws' house at a weekend. We weren't making any money, and we're watching Graham Norton. And this is
pre-beard
relevant.
or post-beard?
I feel like this was pre-beard.
Pre-beard.
I feel like this was pre-beard.
Old school, yeah.
Yeah. And this big, tall, bald guy came and sat in the red chair. And Graham said, what do you do? And he went, I'm not going to do his accent. He was like, I design bike parking facilities. And I was like, Christ, I thought I knew everyone who designed bike parking facilities. Anyway, he got tipped. And I just did some like frantic Googling. And I found this guy called Justin, and he had a company called PFL Spaces. And I emailed him. I was like, hey, do you want to meet for like a coffee? And he probably saw it. I was like, why the hell would I want to meet this guy with this startup for a coffee? Anyway, he did. And he was pretty cold when I first met him, because I was like a new competitor, I guess. But he'd just moved over to London. He had a very successful established business in Australia. Over the years, we became like good friends. He invited me into his office. And to be fair, that was one of those things that got me out of that early rut, if you like, of not making any money and not selling. Justin, I learned a lot about selling through Justin. He's a top guy, and he's still a good friend of mine. Anyway, there's this awful phrase, which I will just say, but it kind of stuck with me at the time, which is he used to always say, we're not here to fight, which is this classic Australian phrase. And I didn't really get it at the time. But what he was saying to me, and it's so true, is I just get involved in any small job, just win a job for a job's sake. And he only went after these absolute monster pieces of work. And it kind of stuck with me, that. I'm slightly ashamed to admit that that's the answer to that question, but focusing on stuff that matters, focusing on the big stuff. So yeah, Justin accidentally taught me that those years ago. I didn't know that was going to be the answer to that then, but that's what came off. So it's a bit of a backstory to that.
It's a good message, right? Aim high. Focus on the important things.
Yeah, don't deal with
don't get bogged down in the small details that perhaps aren't going to move the dial. It's a valuable lesson. George, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That was good fun. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Behind the SME. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps others find the show. If you want to get in touch, you can find our email in the description. Until then, keep building, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.